Good morning. Hi. Couple things to cover this morning, but let's actually start with something that I wrote about this Skai Jackson domestic violence situation just because I think it's strange. So, domestic violence is a serious issue that affects individuals across demographics regardless of gender, race, or size. However, the way these cases are portrayed in the media often reflects underlying biases that can skew public perception. The case of a black ex Disney star and actress, this is Skai Jackson, who allegedly weighs 90 pounds and allegedly pushed her boyfriend, is a prime example of how power dynamics and physical differences are often oversimplified in discussions of domestic violence. To claim that her small stature and the fact that her boyfriend is twice her size automatically negate the possibility of domestic violence is both misleading and dangerous. Domestic violence is not solely about physical size or strength, it is about power and control. And so, just to expound on this for a moment, um, the fact that it sounds like that couple currently is pregnant and they still share a certain amount of intimacy, and her boyfriend has not stated at all, I mean, we don't know, right, but that, she is like harming him. The fact that one instance of her publicly pushing him is causing the media to describe her as a domestic abuser and then putting her under arrest for that, I think is just an overuse of power, especially when we have very clear cases of actual abuse. I think it is America's example of trying to use the criminal justice system to continuously punish black people for existing. Like a 90-pound girl is just unable to do harm to a 180-pound dude who's like 6 inches taller than her. It isn't like she's chasing him around with some, weapon or something that could be used as a weapon. That is not the case. She literally pushed him. So now we're classifying pushing as domestic violence. No. We can talk about the this is us conversation, but let's start there. Domestic violence is not solely about, we already talked about that. Domestic violence is not solely about physical size or strength, it is about power and control. A person can exert control and cause harm in ways that do not involve sheer physical force. In this context, it is crucial to understand that domestic violence encompasses a range of behaviors, including psychological, emotional, and verbal abuse. The physical act of pushing someone, even if it does not result in significant injury, can be a pattern of controlling behavior. Dismissing the possibility of domestic violence simply because one party is physically smaller than the other ignores the complex dynamics that often characterize abusive relationships. The only issue that I have with this, and I just want to push back, is that um, we don't have any other examples here of emotional or physical abuse that has happened. There are no other examples. So the stature and the term domestic abuse being used here simply for the pushing, because that's all that happened. The only evidence at play is pushing. So if there was all of these other things that like came into play, okay, then you could have a bigger conversation. But the and we'll kind of get into why I'm using this example in particular to kind of call out the case. Um okay, I talked about that already. Additionally, the legal definition of domestic violence does not require the victim to be in immediate physical danger. It is enough that the victim feels threatened or controlled by the abuser. Um I don't agree with that just because, like, if that is the case, then I think all black people in America should literally be screaming domestic abuse when they see like a white person, because like you could feel fear given the long history of racial violence toward black people for simply existing. So all black people should just file for domestic violence and just say we can't live in the same place. If that's the case, if that's the argument, the legal argument here, and that just doesn't hold. But okay. So the case of Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie offers a stark contrast in how domestic violence allegations are treated when the accused is a white male. Despite Jolie's accusations that Pitt physically assaulted her and their children on a plane, the media has largely refrained from labeling him as a domestic abuser. The reluctance to use the term domestic violence in Pitt's case highlights the double standard in how the media treats allegations against white men versus those against people of color. While Pitt's celebrity status may shield him from the harsher labels, it is also indicative of a broader societal tendency to downplay or excuse abusive behavior when it's perpetuated by white men. The lack of media coverage labeling Pitt as a domestic abuser is even more troubling when contrasted with the way similar allegations are handled against people of color, like Skai Jackson in this case. The media's selective portrayal of domestic violence cases perpetuates harmful stereotypes and refrains and reinforces racial biases. It suggests that white men are less likely to be abusers, even when there is substantial evidence to the contrary. This disparity in media coverage has real world consequences as it can influence public opinion and the outcome of legal proceedings. The case of the white police officer who body slammed a black 16-year-old girl at a pool party further illustrates the racial biases present in media coverage of violence. Despite the clear use of excessive force and the potential for serious injury, the media did not widely refer to this incident as an act of abuse with the intent to cause bodily harm. This failure to label the officer's actions as abusive is indicative of a broader societal tendency to minimize or excuse violence when it is perpetuated by those in positions of authority, particularly when the victim is a person of color. The media's reluctance to call abusive behavior by white individuals, whether they are celebrities or police officers, contributes to a culture of impunity. It sends the message that certain people are above the law or that their actions are somehow justified, even when they cause harm to others. This double standard is not only perpetuates racial inequalities, but also undermines efforts to hold abusers accountable, regardless of their race, or social status. It is essential to challenge these biases and demand more equitable media coverage of domestic violence and other forms of abuse. The media plays a powerful role in shaping public perception, and by failing to accurately report on these issues, it contributes to a culture of silence and complicity. To address this, we must advocate for more nuanced and fair reporting that does not shy away from labeling abusive behavior, regardless of the perpetuator's race or social standing. Moreover, society must recognize that domestic violence can occur in any relationship, regardless of the physical characteristics of the individuals involved. Dismissing the possibility of domestic violence based on the size or strength of the alleged perpetrator is a dangerous oversimplification that fails to account for the complexities of abusive relationships. It is critical to understand that domestic violence is about power and control, not just physical dominance. In conclusion, the cases of the black ex Disney star Skai Jackson, Brad Pitt, and the white police officer highlight the pervasive racial gender biases in media coverage of domestic violence and other forms of abuse. To combat these biases, we must demand more equitable and accurate reporting that reflects the true nature of these incidents and holds all abusers accountable, regardless of their race or social status. Only by addressing these disparities can we begin to create a society where all individuals are protected from violence and abuse. I also want to say I don't think that the solution is creating a more equitable society where everyone has similar treatment. I think it is more useful to unpack the disparities, specifically the racial disparities in justice that are being perpetuated toward Black people and not allowing them to have the justice that they deserve. And so that as we go into more segregated societies where people are clustered and classified based on their race and ethnic identities, we can always remember like what it was like when we tried and failed. That is how I feel.